Welcome back to Burnout Break Room, the podcast that's like a break room but helpful, where we look at burnout through a realistic lens, talk about ways to take a break from the grind, and spill the tea.
I'm Caitlin Truhella, creativity coach and speaker.
And I'm Lyndie Larimore, licensed therapist, certified career coach, and consultant. We're your hosts. Thank you for joining us here in the Burnout Break Room. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Lindy. How you doing?
Good. I'm in that post vacation glow, which I have to say, to quote a lyric, we can't always get what we want, but when we try, sometimes we get what we need. Apparently, what I needed was COVID.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. Yeah, I had this great, it was a 2 week vacation and I had a few different things planned. And part of it was a beautiful trip out to the Berkshires, complete with
Mm.
concerts and everything. And then COVID had another idea. So I ended up having this really, so first of all, it was like the mildest case I've ever had. It was like done in a day. So I had this
hmm
really nice, like, staycation where I let myself do nothing at all, go nowhere. And it was actually exactly what I needed. And then I was able to, like, I'm headed to the Berkshires as we speak, like right after this. So I was able to have my cake and eat it too. So I'm actually pretty grateful for COVID.
Interesting. So it's in a way, it's almost like you had two vacations because you got to go and do the things that you wanted to, but also like let's not, underestimate the value of just staying home and rotting for a minute.
That was my week. And I highly recommend rotting, I gotta say. How are you, Caitlin?
I'm doing good. So for myself, I've been doing a lot of web design because, long story short, switching over my website, which is a lot, but it's also fun. And I'll be happy to share more about that later. But it's amazing when you think about all of the tiny pieces that go into marketing what it is that you do. And I just keep thinking and like being reminded all the time. I believe it's a quote from Einstein. Albert Einstein said that you don't truly understand something unless you can explain it simply.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep reminding myself of that when going through and read and doing this redesign because I love getting into the details and like going into these like complex concepts and explaining like the, neuroscience behind things. And I have to keep dialing it back. Like, this is a lot.
Yeah, being a nerd is really hard, Caitlin. I feel you.
Oh, so hard.
Hard work. That's exciting though. Congrats. And you know all about this, but the creative process is it's exciting and energizing and a lot of paring down, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and having an understanding especially of like where your audience is coming from, especially if they're already in a state of burnout. Like I think one of the most compassionate things that you can do for people like when you're extending help or resources is to not just be relatable, but to make things simple in a way that's easy to take in the moment. You're not creating like a lot of barriers to it. And I specifically think about especially people dealing with anxiety because dealing with anxiety is already so much to deal with on its own. But then when you build the confidence to go get resources or to talk to people about it, that can be anxiety inducing as well. So you also want to like be aware of what people are experiencing. And we have the absolute pleasure, speaking of anxiety experts, we have the absolute pleasure of having Allison here with us today. She is the founder of Reroute Wellness, empowering those to take control of their mental health with natural, unapologetic tools born from lived experience. We are so happy to have you here, Allison.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison. I'm the founder of Reroute Wellness. I have a panic disorder that I was diagnosed with a few years back, and it's something that I definitely have had to learn to live with and kind of figure out how to lessen my panic attacks and almost get over it in a way, which I still haven't completely gotten over it and don't know how realistic that is this soon. But I've definitely learned ways to take my panic attacks from having them every single day to having them not very often, like maybe once in a blue moon, which is very nice.
Wow, Allison, that's really impressive. It sounds like you've done some really good work in your treatment. And I'm excited to talk to you because I think one thing that we haven't fully said out loud, Caitlan, and that I recall in the podcast so far is burnout in the stress response cycle is anxiety. Like they're very, very closely related. And oftentimes, part of what causes folks to recognize that they're burned out are the anxiety symptoms. And the way that we end the stress response cycle is also very similar to how we manage our anxiety, specifically panic attacks. So, Allison, if you don't mind telling us a little bit. Oh, sorry, I want to say one more thing too. I don't want to forget to say this. So, I've been a therapist for a little while now, and when I first was studying in graduate school, there was this very kind of clear messaging that we as therapists are blank slates. And while we ourselves are instruments and tools of therapy, our stories are not. And so there is this very clear delineation between our lived experience and the others, the other being the client. Like they have the problems, if we do, we keep that to ourselves. And you know and so I noticed there was this real messaging that started to come out in the world of therapy that like they're the people that are struggling, and we have our stuff together, and if we don't tell anyone, including our peers, including our colleagues, especially not our bosses. And then this wonderful thing started happening in the world of mental health where folks who identified as peers, which is someone with lived experience, started to be sitting at the tables, right? They started to be a part of treatment teams. They started to be supporting folks receiving services. And suddenly, as therapists, we were confronted with this idea that, oh, like our experience could actually help someone. What?
Mhm.
Mind blown. So I am so excited to be talking to you, Allison, because you are someone who very much uses your lived experience as a form of helping others heal. So would you mind sharing a little bit about your story and how you came to the work that you're doing?
So it started getting really bad around 2021, like the beginning of the year.
Mm,
And I didn't really know what it was at first. So honestly, when I would get these panic attacks, I completely convinced myself that I was dying.
mm,
Like I would literally think I was having a heart attack or
mhm,
that I needed to go to the hospital. And it was terrifying, especially the first one that I ever had that was truly bad. Like I remember my heart rate was so high. I would constantly be feeling my pulse. It was just so bad. And especially when I was with friends, it that was honestly when it was the worst for me because I got really embarrassed,
mhm,
which I know they didn't think it was embarrassing and they would try to help me and tell me that it wasn't. But in my head, I was just always feeling so ashamed that my friends were going to think it was embarrassing or that I was embarrassing myself around new people, anything like that. And that's kind of where, the reason I started my business in general is because I wanted to make something that empowered people that struggle with the same thing I do to not feel embarrassed.
mhm,
Because I know mental health is becoming more talked about nowadays and it's not as taboo. But I think one thing that a lot of people don't focus on is the shameful part of it.
mhm,
And I don't really hear a lot of people talking about how they feel embarrassed about how they feel. And that was one thing that I really struggled with.
mhm.
Again, like I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. And that was one of the worst things for me was feeling embarrassed calling an ambulance, which I did one time. And just certain things like that because of a panic disorder, which later on I found out that it was just anxiety and it wasn't anything with me. Like I wasn't dying. Didn't have any issues. Because I did go to the doctor and they did check different things. But yeah, and once I found out that that's just what it was, I think the more I had them and the more I realized that what was happening was just my like trauma response or my anxiety, that's when they started to lessen and I started to get them less and less.
Hmm.
Mm. I sincerely appreciate your perspective, Allison, because you're absolutely right. We don't talk a lot about the associated feeling of shame with having this kind of response. And you're reminding me very much of one of the first indicators that I had leading into the realization that I was burnt out at work. When I would get so nervous about volatile situations at work, but turning into like a day to day occurrence where I physically could not stop shaking. And the
Mhm.
first response to that being, I'm so embarrassed if anybody sees what's going on here because if I had like have to hold a piece of paper or something like that, it's going to become that much more obvious and everybody's going to think that there's something wrong with me. And again, like internalizing that experience that, it's like somehow I have failed because there's something wrong with me. I'm having this reaction. But of course, like once we take a step back and see that it is a reaction in those cases to an external situation, a prolonged problem, again, external problem, it's the stress response. That's nothing to be ashamed of. And for everybody listening, if you get nothing else from this podcast, please know that you're not less of a person for having this response. There's not something inherently wrong with you, and there are a lot of solutions. And so that's another reason why we're very happy to talk about this today. And thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Caitlan, I absolutely agree with you. And Allison, I'm so excited to talk about shame with you, which is such a weird sentence. This is like, I'm so excited because I will share um in my work as a therapist right now, I had this huge realization just a little while ago that I think I've talked about here before that um I I'm someone who works with folks who are experiencing burnout. And in that work, I actually started to do some treatment of ADHD. And so a lot of folks would come to me and say, I need help with time management or I need help with my scheduling. And I would help them with that. And then we would hit a wall every time, and realize, first of all, that they actually could dance circles around my knowledge of these things because they had ADHD and they'd already done the deep dive, right? And
Mhm.
knew all the things. And just like everything else they tried, these hacks were not working. I suddenly realized the wall was shame. And if we weren't working through the shame, I couldn't help them any more than a TikTok video. So
Mhm.
I'm curious, Allison, how you recognized the S word, right? Shame, and how you've, if you're in the process of working through it or how you've worked through it. Please teach me.
Yeah, so I actually learned or I figured out what I was feeling because of my old therapist actually. I've been going to therapy for I think I started going to therapy. Well, I started a while ago, but I restarted therapy in 2020. And then I actually just recently stopped with my therapist back in March of this year, which is really crazy because I'm so used to like going to therapy, talking to her every week or every other week. So it's been a couple months without it. And it's nice to feel like I've come such a long way, but she's actually the one that helped me recognize that what I was feeling was shame because I would kind of tell, like, I didn't really know what that was for some reason. And I would talk to her about my panic attacks. And then I would tell her like for some reason it made me feel so nauseous, like being around people. I just felt this weird feeling, and then I didn't even know if I wanted to like see these people again. And that's when I realized that um, I was just feeling so embarrassed for no reason, and especially because a lot of this was happening when I was in college at Michigan State, and I would have panic attacks during class sometimes, which I know you mentioned, Caitlan, about holding a piece of paper and not wanting people to see you shaking because of anxiety. And that's kind of how I felt, especially even just sitting in the big lecture halls, because MSU is a humongous school, and a lot of my classes were in these huge lecture halls of like 300, 400 people. And I remember I'd be sitting in my seat, like, of course, not knowing anybody, and I would just be freaking out. And there's a couple times where I did have to leave the class because I literally couldn't breathe. And like, one of my things that I always did was feel my pulse, which, oh my gosh, I always got so embarrassed from that specifically. And I didn't want people to see me, so I would like sit in my chair and just be like looking around, trying to look not suspicious, I guess. And yeah, that was probably one of the most embarrassing parts for me was when I was in college trying to hide how I was feeling in these classes and everything. And I honestly am not even sure what kind of made me get out of that exactly, but the more that I did do therapy, the more that I talked to my therapist and realized what was happening is when I kind of had that breakthrough and started not feeling embarrassed, which eventually led to me having less panic attacks, I think.
Mm. I especially relate to the feeling like it's one thing to experience a panic attack or an anxiety attack like as you experience it, but also to experience it on such a public level. It's like one
Hmm.
of those situations where I mean, just like you said, you can be surrounded by, hundreds of people in a lecture hall and, never feel more alone in your life. And also like that to turn into a feeling of, there's like hundreds of eyes on me right now, which only compounds the situation. And I also wanted to ask you in those kinds of situations, like especially since you empathize with this situation. For example, if you were back like in that lecture hall and
Hmm.
like the person next to you, do you think you would be able to tell if they were having like some kind of panic attack? And if so, like even as a stranger, like what would you do to I don't know if I would say like directly help them, but just like be a supportive voice.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like because I've become so open about like all of my mental health, everything recently, I feel like I would definitely want to hopefully be able to help someone if I did notice that they were having a panic attack. Um, and I think I maybe possibly would be able to tell just because I know like the signs and even like the secret signs of like for me, I would be looking around a lot and just like the shakiness and like the weird breathing. There's different things that you can kind of tell, even if they're very mute and quiet. You can kind of tell when someone is having one. Um, and I don't know, because when I think about it, if I was having one and someone noticed and they were trying to help me, I think I would appreciate that a lot. And I would like want to talk to someone about it because I think talking about it does actually help a lot. But I don't know if everyone does feel the same way. I know some people maybe would, like I said, be embarrassed if someone was like, "Hey, like, do you need any water? Do you want to go outside the lecture hall and just walk around for a little bit?" Which is something that I did a lot. I would walk around. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I would want to help, but at the same time, I don't know how the other person would feel about that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely see that too because like there's a fine line between like offering help to a stranger, but then also like not wanting to put somebody on the spot. So
Mhm.
I can definitely understand that.
Allison, you're dropping so much wisdom. I think you bring up a couple of great points there that I think we can all learn from here. Because we're talking about two different things, actually. We're talking about anxiety, which is the kind of the foundation of a panic attack, or embarrassment leading to shame. And so in dialectical behavioral therapy, we call that the second arrow emotion. So
Mm,
there's the basic emotion, which is, whether it's fear, anger, sadness, kind of the primary colors of emotions. And then oftentimes we have a feeling about having a feeling. And
mm,
that's where things like embarrassment, guilt, shame start to come up. Sometimes the second arrow
Mhm.
emotion is anger, right? Depending on what's going on, like angry at ourselves for feeling something. So, Allison, you brought up this really important point that so if a person's having a panic attack, I want to just highlight, first of all, that panic attacks are unique and that they are a mental health experience diagnosis that happens on the outside. That's very visible. True panic attacks, they're hard to miss. They can
Mhm.
be loud. They can, it can involve vomiting, it can involve passing out, right? They can get really, a lot of people do think they're dying when they're having a panic attack. It can be painful. And so it is one of the only mental health experiences that are on the outside, that are out loud.
Mhm.
So I also like how you highlighted sometimes panic attacks happen because you're afraid of having a panic attack. So it's like and now I'm
Yeah.
like more nervous about having panic attack. And then if you add shame on top of that, correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, like in my experience of having panic attacks myself, it exacerbates the panic attack, right?
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly how I would feel too. And that's why a lot of the times, I guess, going back to the lecture hall thing, because for some reason that specifically was where I would have them a lot in school.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's why a lot of the times I did end up leaving the class and trying to go to the bathroom or walk around until I calmed myself down because for me, like depending on where I was, my panic attacks are definitely more visible. There's a lot of times where like I'll start crying because of them because I just freak like I just spiral when I have them. Like I completely convince myself that I'm going to like pass out or
Mm-hmm.
like just die. It's
Yes.
crazy how your mind convinces you of these things that
Mm-hmm.
are not even happening in real life. But yeah, so yeah, I completely understand that and it sucks that a lot of the times they are so visible because then that leads you to that second emotion, like you said, and then it just snowball effects from there.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I appreciate, Allison, is you've done a wonderful job, not only of sharing your story, which helps to combat shame when it comes to mental health and seeking support, but you have some really great tips on managing anxiety. I wonder if you'd feel comfortable sharing some of those.
Thank you so much. I feel so sometimes I feel weird like sharing them because obviously I'm not a therapist. I didn't even go to school for like anything mental health related, but the only reason I do know so many tips and everything is because of my years going to therapy. So I'm very glad and grateful that I did that. And to other people listening that may be struggling with this, I definitely recommend talking to a therapist because it's a lot more helpful than you would think. But yeah, so some of the tips that I specifically really liked, one huge thing that I talk a lot about in different videos, and one of the main things that helped me is overall exposure therapy. And my therapist mentioned a while ago that the more that I would have panic attacks and like fully feel them, then the less I would have them because your brain, it's like a pattern. And the more your brain recognizes it, then the less scary it feels and the more intense they are. So a lot of the times, another place where I get really bad panic attacks and still do sometimes is when I'm driving. And I don't know why, but for some reason when I drive. I've never even gotten like in a car accident or anything like that. I just get it really bad when I'm driving because I'll convince myself that I'm gonna pass out at the wheel or that like something's gonna happen and I'll be alone and that no one will be able to like take over and help me drive, I guess. But So something I started doing is like keeping tools on me, like sour candy or something to squeeze to like fidget with,
Mhm.
and just like different little tools that when I was having a panic attack when I was driving, instead of pulling over like I used to, I just started forcing myself to feel it, not in a dangerous way. Like if it was really that bad, I would definitely pull over. But
Yeah.
if it was just starting to happen, I would just like use my tools and continue to drive and feel what was happening rather than pulling over and trying to stop it because sometimes that makes it worse. Well,
Mhm.
for me at least, sometimes that actually made it worse. So, yeah, that's like probably one of my biggest tips and one of the biggest things that I've done to kind of lessen them over time.
As you were talking about not only learning these tips and skills through your own experience, but also in your conversations with your therapist, I just want to take a
Mhm.
moment to appreciate, all of the work that you've put in, even like up to this point to not only like coach yourself through each one of these moments, but to like reinforce I'm I'm okay. This doesn't need to like spiral every time, and like I have the tools and the confidence to take each one of these moments one at a time and do the work to take care of yourself. So, I just want to take a moment and congratulate you for that because
Thank you.
it is hard. And especially when, over such a long period of time, it can, at least speaking from, my own experience, it can feel like when am I going to make more progress with this? When am I going to be, and I'm going to use quotes, fixed? Because of course,
Mhm.
like we're not a problem that needs fixing or anything like that. But at least to be able to have, the tools and tricks to help process these things when they happen so that, you can live your life. So, yeah, congratulations on this incredible work. And going to also what you were saying about I love the pattern recognition, but also as you've talked before, and I know you've mentioned this on your social media too, one of the simplest ways that we can help calm our nervous system in those moments. And honestly, this can also be applied even if you're not having a panic attack, is bringing, as you were talking about, bringing your awareness to the different senses, to touch
Mhm.
something, to hear something, to look for something blue, to taste something different, to help bring your awareness out of only experiencing one thing. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like the five senses are super helpful in trying to ground yourself, and that's honestly one of the most important things.
Allison, I got really excited when I saw your social media because I did you teach the 5 4 3 2 1 technique? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. I think I might have made a, I can't remember. I might have made a video on that before, but yeah, that's another thing that I learned from my therapist as well.
Do you want to share what that is?
Correct me if I'm wrong in the order, but this is what I remember. Okay.
Yeah.
It's five things you can see,
Hmm.
four things. Oh my gosh, I can't remember if it's four things you can hear or if it's four things you can touch. Okay, yeah. So five things you can see, four things you can touch, three things you can hear, two things you can smell, and then one thing that you can taste.
Yes.
Was that right? Okay.
Right
Because I
on.
couldn't remember. Like,
Right on. That's one of my most favorite like grounding techniques because you can do it anywhere at any time.
Mhm,
And it's also like also connects you with joy. Because
Mm.
what I tell people when I'm teaching them this is first their first response is like, how do I not know about this? Like, why don't they teach this to us in school? Because we don't always like have something we can taste or smell necessarily in front of us. So it's like, what's your favorite smell? What's your favorite thing to taste? What's your favorite meal or dessert or something? Or like you said, Allison, like have some good mints or like what do they call those? Like the the hot tamales or something, like spicy or sour
Yeah.
things in your,
Mm,
so that you can have that as a grounding tool. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Allison, because that's a really effective tool that any of us can do at any time. And it absolutely helps with anxiety, because any moment that you're thinking about this moment, you are not anxious.
hmm
Like if you're
Hmm.
truly in this, anxiety is often associated with the future, depression is often associated with the past.
Hmm.
So anytime we're very much in this moment, we tend to not be fully experiencing either one of those things. Caitlan, you and I were vibing because I wanted to really highlight, Allison, that in sharing your story, you're sharing the dirty little secret that I often hate sharing with people, that the way to treat anxiety is through anxiety.
Hmm.
And so I often, when folks are coming to me for anxiety, I often have to be like, I'm so sorry, but what I'm going to ask you to do is to experience anxiety,
Hmm.
hmm
which means folks who have gone through and stuck with treatment for anxiety are incredibly courageous.
hmm
So I'm wondering if you can speak at all, Allison, to like what it was like to be like, oh, in exposure therapy, I have to experience anxiety. I have to sit with it. I have to be in my body. Like, what was that like at first? And how did you access the courage to go through that?
Yeah. So I guess this kind of relates to before I even started doing or like forcing myself to do an exposure therapy type action. I tried medication at first, and I'm not saying I'm against or for medication. Everyone is different, and I know that everyone reacts different. But for me, at least, it did not work at all. It actually made my anxiety worse, and I don't know why, but that was just for me. It didn't react well with my body, and I think in my head, like taking new like medications scared me so much that it would cause me to have anxiety. So I tried that at first, and then after I stopped taking medication, I that's when my therapist was like, "Okay, we're gonna try this." And I've always been someone who like really wanted to put in the work to feel better and to not have panic attacks as often. Like I didn't just like listen to what she said and kind of ignore it. Like I like truly wanted to put in the work. So I would like straight up force myself to do certain things. So, for example, like I said, when one of the main places I get panic attacks is in my car when I'm driving. So, I remember a couple things I used to do was I would have one of my friends sit in the passenger seat so that just in case like something happened, which it wasn't going to, but in my head, just in
Mhm.
case something happened that I would have someone there with me. And specifically, the highways and at night was when they got really bad. So I would wait till nighttime and have my friend with me and literally just go on the highway and just kind of go in a loop, like around where my house is, just to feel like I'm okay. Like it was nice having someone with me because it's like there's someone there just in case, and I'm doing this thing and nothing bad's happening. So
Mhm.
it's like that pattern recognition that you mentioned. And one of the times that I truly had like the most confidence to push myself even further with exposure therapy was last year. It was last summer for my birthday. I ended up driving to Nashville from Michigan for my birthday with my friends. And I remember telling them, like, okay, guys, I'm gonna force myself to drive the whole 8 hours. Like, don't switch with me, even if I ask. Like, just because they all know about my panic attacks. Like, I I mean, they've seen it happen in real life, so obviously they were gonna know about it. I was just like, okay, just let me do it. And that was like a huge turning point for me because that's when last year after that was when I truly realized a huge difference. And I haven't like, I still get them sometimes, but barely as often at all now, because of that huge 8 hour car ride where I was just driving on the highway the entire time and forcing myself to do something that scared me so much.
Truly remarkable, Allison, that you're reminding me of a story of someone that I treated who would have a panic attack when he got into his car. And we did what was called the laddering down technique, which is well, what does that mean? And what does that mean? And we get a little bit
Hmm.
further down, a little bit further down. And he was able to remember that there was a time where his car broke down in a tunnel in the middle of a big city. And he remembered specifically this moment where he had to get out of his car and felt like, he was about to get hit by a semi. And
Oh my gosh, that's
so,
terrifying.
right. And so I think the thing that he recognized was he's like, I'm not afraid of driving. I'm afraid of dying. Right. And of
Hmm.
course, we're going to be afraid, like that's a terrifying experience. And he was just reliving that every time he got into his car. So it's so wonderful, Allison, that you have, speaking of shame, right? Like you've brought people into your treatment team, your friends who can be there with you and support you as you're knowing that I might really feel anxious. I might have a panic attack, and having you here helps me know that worst case scenario, I can pull over, you can take over. But I'm wondering, Allison, what it was like to have those conversations with your friends at first, or when they saw your first panic attack, and how did you work through that with your friends?
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah, honestly, I have such amazing friends, and I'm so grateful for that, that they're so like caring and understanding. So that is a huge part of it. But I I can't even honestly remember the first time I like really mentioned it to them. I remember the first time I had a really bad one was with one of my friends, Marissa, and I just remember this so vividly because it was in a backseat of our other friend's car. And that was like one of the first times I like really had a panic attack. And like she was just so nice. Like we pulled over and I was just breathing for a bit and she was like talking me through it, I guess. And that was like one of the first times I remember having one and talking to my friends about it. And then the more I had them and like with my other friends being there, like specifically the Nashville situation, they all, the other three friends I was with, they all knew about my panic attacks before this because they've either been there when it's happened or actually, yeah, they've all been there when it's happened. Like I've just had so many of them back in the past that pretty much all my friends have been there at least for one. And yeah, so I think that's why I didn't really feel scared, like telling them, like, hey, this might happen. I might have to pull over and switch, but I'm going to try my best not to have that happen. I'm going to try my best to make it all the way through. And yeah, I think like a huge part is just having a support system that cares about you, but also giving that back as well. Like you don't want it to be a one-sided thing, like if that makes
mm.
sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, what a treasure, to have great friends like that that are not only understanding, but hold space for you in that way. And also, as you said, you guys hold space for each other in that way is so incredibly helpful, especially like when you're first becoming comfortable talking about it. And when I used to have panic attacks on a more regular basis, part of like my communication to my friends would be in in these moments, it would be really helpful like for you to ask like, do you want like a reassuring presence, like I'm here, you're not alone, or do you want a distraction? And
Hmm.
sometimes I would ask them, yeah, I'd really appreciate a distraction. And yeah, so sometimes they would just like make up these really weird stories and just kind of like go on a rant themselves, and that would be incredibly helpful. So, and also just like recognizing our community in general as well, like, and going back to what we were talking about a little bit before in terms of the shame aspect, if more of us talked about, our experiences with anxiety, whether it's, a once in a while experience or, a daily occurrence, I think we would help normalize that experience a lot more to be able to share our experience and not feel so weird about it.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's get rid of some of the shame and shaming when it comes to receiving mental health services, to having mental health struggles. Let me tell you. everyone has them. That's the thing that I think is not said out loud. Like
Mm.
everyone has mental health struggles. They
Mm-hmm.
might not become something that is a diagnosis, but everyone experiences grief at one point or another. Everyone experiences anxiety. I will say one of the things I like to tell folks, there have been documented cases of folks who have had brain injuries that have caused them to no longer experience anxiety. What do you think happened? Any guesses as to what might have happened in those situations?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
Mm. My brain wants to also, I just realized what a meta statement this is. My brain wants to explore the neuroscience behind it.
Whoa, whoa, that's a lot.
I'm speaking about my brain in the third person. What's happening here? But I want to say it's like damage to a specific part of the brain.
Yes. So in one situation, their amygdala was calcified,
Whoa.
Yeah, that's crazy.
right? Yeah. So the amygdala is like the smoke alarm of the brain. So when any kind of perceived threat comes through any one of our five senses, everything goes through the amygdala, and it is what turns on the fight or flight response. So it's very much like a smoke alarm.
Mm.
And is falsely triggered, very much like a smoke alarm, a lot, and sometimes accurately triggered. But any guesses as to what happened for those for a couple of folks who couldn't experience anxiety anymore?
I feel like something bad probably because if you don't have like a fight or flight, then if something actually is happening to you, wouldn't you not know how to respond to it?
You are right on, Allison.
Mm.
So the I believe is a woman whose amygdala was calcified. She ended up getting mugged three times in like three separate spaces.
Oh
Just
my gosh.
Oh
became a
no.
part of her normal experience. Because you think about it, like we know not to walk down a dark alley at night, right?
Hmm.
Or like have a conversation with that nice person who is, lurking in the corner, right? Like we just know not to do that. She lost the ability to, discretion, basically.
Mm.
Another person, I think it was just kind of a more traditional brain injury. They ended up having to hire basically bodyguards for him because he would, I want to try flying, and he would just kind of go jump off of things, or that kind of thing. So you're exactly right, Allison. Anxiety is important. We don't want to
Hmm.
get rid of our anxiety, and yet it's about finding that balance of using it as a signal and information and not running our lives.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, even just in terms of like giving a visual to that mechanism, Lindy, like you said, it's a smoke alarm. And I think about in all the places that I've lived with the different, smoke alarms. Yeah, sometimes they go off mistakenly, or heaven forbid, like when the battery goes out and they just, they won't stop beeping. It's more of an annoyance than anything else. But I mean that's a great visualization for that mechanism because the more that I personally have like started to learn to recognize when those alerts happen, that even just a simple recognition, almost like, talking to your anxiety as like a disembodied person, like I know that you're here to protect me. And I know that you think there is some kind of danger happening right now. And I appreciate you for what you're doing, but I'm not currently in danger. And in other like form of mechanism, and this kind of goes back to like some tips that we were talking about before, but it also reminds me of a couple of years ago, I was in a pretty bad car accident and had a lot of like very specific, car related anxiety afterwards. And I had read about flooding therapy, and because I didn't want this to be a new reality of like being terrified every time I was in a car and just like constantly being on that expectation that something was going to happen, I used to watch a lot of car crash compilations on YouTube.
Wow. Wow. Talking of courage. Wow.
So, like, and to this day, I feel like it might be kind of like a weird approach, but it helped so much because it was almost like recognizing, okay, yeah, anxiety, you're here to protect me and, be a warning for those things that either are happening or might happen. And I appreciate that heads up, but like that was a great way to kind of reinforce like, okay, this doesn't happen every day, but just reframing that experience. And I'm happy to say that it helped a lot. And even nowadays, like if I'm feeling particularly stressed out just because the day or whatever, it doesn't have to be car related. Yeah, sometimes, I'll watch like 10 minutes worth of like car crash compilations and I
Oh my
feel
gosh.
so much better.
You heard it here first, folks. Best cure for anxiety is car crash compilations.
Right?
I am so impressed with you, Caitlin. I don't know that I could make that happen for myself, but wow. Glad it worked. That's great.
Mm,
I just want to thank both of you. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Allison, for your vulnerability and your willingness to share and for what you're doing in the world to help normalize anxiety and the need for mental health support and, giving really helpful information on kind of just ways of managing. And thanks so much for taking the time to come visit us here in the Burnout Break Room.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Honestly, this was such a great conversation, and it's so nice to be able to talk about something that, of course, you both understand. And it's just, yeah, it was a really good conversation. So thank you so much for having me.
absolutely. And thank you also for being here, Allison. This has been a wonderful conversation and I feel like we've done so much good work today in terms of normalizing these conversations, getting them more out in the open. And for anybody that wants to share their experience or their top tip that has helped them the most through their anxiety or any like panic attack related experiences, please share them in the comments. Let us know, and we'd love to share them with folks as well. So, but thank you for being here. And Allison, when you're not in the break room, where can people find you?
Yeah, so my business Instagram is at Reroute Wellness, Reroute. And then my TikTok is Reroute Wellness Official. And then my website is just www.reroutewellness.com.
Wonderful. And Lindy, when you're not in the break room, where can people find you?
Folks can go to my website, lindylairamore.com. They can also find me on Instagram at Lindy Laramore or LinkedIn, also at Lindy Laramore. And Caitlin, what about you? Where can we find you?
Nowadays, you can find me at CaitlinTruhella.com. But otherwise, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, generally social media at Creative Caitlin. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well at Caitlin Truhella.
And please stalk us at the Burnout Break Room on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook. We love comments. We love hearing about your burnout experience, tips and tricks. Yeah, come be our stalkers. We highly invite you to do that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us here in the Burnout Break Room today, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.